Okay, I've been doing a few of them and I think I got it kind of figured out. So let me show you the steps again. That'll work. Alright, tank is off. Install it with the tank up. Alright, turn the tank over. Leave it off of the edge of the table so that you can reach the handle. Open the tank. You'll hear it rush in. And I haven't seen any real improvement after the first 30 seconds or so. I'm going to rock the tank a little bit, just if there's any air bubbles, maybe they'll force themselves out. Because you're transferring liquid and the gas has got to come back out. So we're not venting it back into the tank, basically. Just a gentle rocking. I don't know if that makes any difference or not. Okay, now close the tank upside down. That'll trap any liquid in there. Okay, turn it back over. Double check that I'm actually all the way closed. Then tip yourself back down a ways so that liquid will be on the bottom of the canister. Spin it off, you get a little hiss. Right there, that was it. Alright, now check my scale. I've been weighing each one as I went to see which will work better. That was my best one yet, 563. Alright. I kind of wanted to give you my final impression of the process and my recommendations. As far as safety and whatnot, okay, this is your typical Coleman propane 1 pound canister. Alright, these are not made to be refilled. Personally, I might recommend that you just don't refill it, and I'll give you some reasons later. But if you're watching this video, you've probably decided you'd want to refill it anyway, so I'm going to try to give you the pros and cons, and it may not be worth your trouble, honestly. Alright, so the anatomy of the tank, you get the normal, this is, where you hook up your appliance, whatever. If it's a propane stove, this would screw onto the adapter. And what you may not notice right away is there's this little detail here. That is a pressure relief valve. In my video, I didn't mess with that at all. I've seen some Instructables and other places on the internet where they talked about actually using this pressure relief valve to vent the tank when you're filling it. That's a good theory. It's a lot more dangerous. So if you go down that road, good luck. It's not designed to do that. Okay. You may have problems with that. Federal law, it is on the tank. Never refill this cylinder. Refilling may cause explosion. Federal law prohibits transportation if refilled. Penalty up to $500,000 fine and 5 years imprisonment. Okay? It's right on the tank. So, going forward, one other background, I worked at a place for a while that one of my jobs was to refill propane tanks for customers. Not these, but the big white ones, the 15, 20 pound tanks and so on. Those are designed to be refilled, and part of their design is they have a vent on them. Part of that process is when you're pumping the liquid into the tank, you have to let the gas out of the tank so that it can fill. Otherwise it'll just get pressurized and it won't fill. Propane tanks have liquid on the bottom and the gas on top. The way that propane works, it evaporates at a very low temperature. And again, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the way that these work is you're storing liquid. The liquid evaporates at normal temperatures, what we would consider normal temperatures. And then your appliance, your heater, your stove, whatever, is actually burning the gas. It's kind of like natural gas. It's just coming out as a gas. It's not coming out as a liquid. If you were to turn this thing upside down, the liquid would try to come out. And most appliances aren't made to work that way. So you'll see warnings on some of them are on here, some of them are on your appliances. Do not use this upside down. That's why the liquid will come out. It's not made to burn a liquid. Bad things could happen. Just leave it at that. You'll look like this guy, you're on fire and exploding. All right. So when we refill a propane tank for a customer, you're putting liquid propane into the tank and you're opening up a bleed valve, which is allowing the gaseous propane to come out so that you get more liquid in. And then when it gets to be basically full, you'll see, you'll hear a hissing, you see a little bit of a white cloudy vapor come out, and then the sound will change. It'll really start spurting pretty energetically, and then you quickly shut the valve, close the vent, and then stop your propane source from pumping in. Okay. If you were to do that on one of these, you could fill it up at least as full as it was when it's new. However, that would be extremely dangerous because this vent valve is not meant to be used that way. If you are unable to get it to seal correctly, you'll lose all your propane and it'll just keep going until it runs out of pressure. And on one of the tanks that I refilled in the video, I actually had the main valve do the same thing. It didn't seal the first time. I took it off, it vented a lot, I just put it right back on again, took it off again, and then it sealed, and then it didn't have a problem. But my reason for saying that is, if you think about the risks involved with doing this, it may just not be worth your trouble for the amount of money you save. Okay, so just, if I'm talking you out of this, good. It's not trivial. There is a lot of potential for fires, explosions. You could hurt yourself. You could burn your house down. It's not exceptionally dangerous. It's no more dangerous than using power tools. But there's a lot of potential for risk. So just go with that, okay? Now the numbers, because the reason you're probably doing this in the first place is you're trying to save money because you don't want to keep spending money on propane. I was using a propane tank that I bought from Walmart through the Blue Rhino program, which is a propane tank exchange service. The reason, okay, let me explain how that works. The old way is you would go to a camping supply store or something like that, Camping World or whatever, and you would buy a propane tank. They would probably sell it to you full, or you might buy it empty. The propane tank has to be inspected every so many years. When it's, I believe, 5 or 10 years old, you can't refill it anymore. It's no longer safe, and so they just destroy it, and then you buy a new one. It got to the point it's hard to find a place now that will refill tanks for you because they don't have anybody trained on staff that can do it. It's not exceptionally difficult, it's just, it's hard to find qualified people anymore that can refill tanks for you. So rather than going that direction, places like Walmart and a lot of convenience stores and gas stations and so on will have this cage outside. Blue Rhino is one, and I've seen some other names, where you buy a tank from them. It is your tank. You're paying for the tank. You're not renting it. But when your tank is empty, you take it back, and rather than them refilling that tank, they just exchange you for a full tank. And then they send it back to someplace, and then in commercial quantities, they refill these things. And then it makes sense to have a trained person refilling a bunch of tanks instead of one guy filling a tank, maybe one tank a day. It's just not worth the trouble. When you buy your first tank, it's more expensive because you're buying the tank plus you're buying the propane that's in the tank. In 2018, in January, when I bought my tank, it was $43 at Walmart for a 15-pound tank with propane in it. I don't remember the exact number, but when I go back the next time, I will take my tank trade them for a full one, give them my empty one. It's kind of like a deposit, like, you know, when you used to get a nickel back for taking your Coke bottle back. It's sort of the same idea. So I will trade them my empty tank. They'll give me a full tank. Instead of it costing me $43, I think it's going to cost about $20 or $25 for 15 pounds of propane. Propane is typically weighed by the pound and not by the gallon. Okay, so the little green canister, that's a 1 pound canister. The big tank in the video was a 15-pound tank, so it would hold the equivalent of 15 of those little tanks. Now the numbers, again at Walmart, January 2018, the little 1 pound canisters were about $3.50. Sometimes I'd buy them in a 2-pack. You don't save very much, but you do save a little bit. So just figure 1 pound, $3.50 versus $43 for a 15-pound tank. If I do the math per pound on the new tank, $43 divided by 15 pounds is $2.86 per pound. I'm saving 63 cents per pound by putting the propane from the big tank into the little tank. Really not worth the time or the money and the risk to do it that way. My other video where I showed using a propane tank adapter, which then lets you use the big tank to run a small appliance, that makes way more sense. With one exception. If it's not convenient for you to have that 15-pound tank sitting within 6 or 10 feet of your appliance, in my case I'm using a Mr. Heater portable propane heater. I'm using a green camp stove. The one I have is actually from Walmart, but it's similar to the Coleman camp stove, right? So for me to use this inside the bus, which is technically safe because propane only releases water vapor for exhaust, it doesn't release carbon monoxide. It does still burn the air that you breathe, but it's not going to poison you with carbon monoxide gas. Okay, so it's technically, most people consider it safe to use a propane heater in an enclosed space. It won't kill you from carbon monoxide. It will kill you eventually from burning up all your air, but it takes a long time. And in my case, in a school bus, I get so many air leaks in the bus that I'm not going to die really, because fresh air is constantly blowing in through the loose windows. So, you kind of pick your poison, take your chances, whatever. Acceptable risk is the word I like to use. If I wanted to, and in fact I did it for a while, I had the big 15-pound tank, the hose kit, the adapter hooked up to the heater. Works great. That will last me a long time because I don't run the heater for hours at a time. I just heat it up, shut it off, do what I'm doing. If I get cold, I turn it on again. Kind of like your furnace doesn't run constantly, it just runs when you need it. The problem was I had a confined amount of space in here, and that 15-pound tank was always in the way. Plus I had the hose, plus I had the heater. So it's less convenient for me to have the big tank sitting here. But if I had a good place to put the tank where it's out of the way and I just wanted to run the heater, I would totally just say use the big tank and the hose kit and your heater. Same way with the stove. I'm not going to move the stove very much, so I could find a spot to put the tank under the counter, run the hose up, hook it up to the stove, use that as it is. And I also had on the other video, a manifold kit that hooks up to the tank and had multiple outlets, and so you could run your heater and your stove at the same time and not have to keep disconnecting it and reconnecting it. That would work wonderfully. So that would be my recommendation. If you wanted to use, the only time this really makes sense, and this is the adapter, it's pretty small. This end hooks up onto the tank, the big tank. This end connects to the little tank. If you were going to use this, where it really makes sense is if you already have a bunch of little tanks and you're using your appliance sporadically, not long term, as far as you're not like, burning a whole bunch of propane every day. And you want to be able to move something. Like for instance, my portable heater, I've got it in the bus, but I can also take it out to my camper shell where I'm sleeping, just because it's easier to heat up a small space than it is to heat up the bus. And so in the cold weather, I'm sleeping out in a smaller space because I can heat that easier. And I didn't want to have to carry the 15-pound tank back and forth. And you'd have, so you get your tank, you got all your hose, and the heater. And that's like 2 hands trying to get the door open. It's just a major pain. So it's easier to move a portable heater with just a 1-pound tank on it than it is to move it with 15-pound tank plus the hose dragging behind you. So in that respect, yeah, it's probably worth it. But for the amount of money that I'm saving, it's pretty insignificant. And okay, this is a rough number again. I don't remember exactly, but let's say I can exchange my tank for a filled tank, and it's going to cost me $25 instead of $43. That could be high, it could be low. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. I remember asking, and I don't remember the answer. I don't think I wrote it down anywhere that I can find. So I don't have a price in front of me that says I can get a refilled 15-pound tank through the tank exchange program for a certain price. So let's say arbitrarily it'll cost me $25 for 15 pounds of propane using the tank exchange program. Okay. So if it's $25 for 15 pounds, that takes me to $1.66 per pound. That's a little bit less than half the price of a 1-pound canister by itself, the green canister. Okay, so that would take my propane cost down to 1/2. However, using the method that I showed, and this is some from measurement and some from the label on the canister, on the green 1-pound canister. And I'm just reading it off my laptop. I tried doing the math on the main video when I was shooting it, and I got a couple things wrong, so I think I deleted all that out, and I'm going to give you the best numbers I have here. A 16-ounce or 1-pound canister net weight by the label is 456 grams. I was using grams because it felt like it was more precise than ounces. It's just, and I'm from Canada, so I think in metric as much as I do in ounces and pounds. So the empty canisters that I had to start with were right around 370 grams empty. A full canister that I had not used was right around 833 grams. So if I take the 833 that I weighed a full canister at and their number of 456 net weight of the propane in the canister, that would come out to, so if I say 833 minus 456 of propane, that would give me 377 grams empty weight of the canister. The empty weight that I saw was 370, so that's within a couple of percent. That's close enough for most of what we're going to do here. So I figured an empty canister is about 370 grams. The best full canister that I filled, after filling it, I weighed it, it came out to 653 grams. By those numbers, I got it to about 60% full, and that was the best one I got. So you're dealing with the risk of filling the canister. It may leak. I had one that leaked out of about 17. I was able to get it to seal, but there's always a chance that it could leak. There's a fire risk, there's a possible explosion risk, there's the exposure to the gas itself. If you screw it up, the liquid I think is very cold. You could get a freeze burn from it. I didn't wear glass. I did have safety glasses on. I didn't have gloves, I should say. So there's a lot of potential risk there. And the best case I can say right now is you're saving at best about $1.50 to $2 per canister. That you can buy it for $3.50 a piece, new, safe, ready to go. And the ones that I refilled, I only got them about 60% full at best. So instead of having a 1 pound canister, I had one that's about a little bit over half a pound. So that means it's going to work for less time. My heater will run out sooner. My gas stove will not burn as long. Okay. So personally, if somebody was going to ask me, is it worth doing? Probably not. If you're in my situation where you're living off grid, you don't have electric heat, you don't have natural gas heat, and you're trying to keep warm, I would go with the first recommendation, getting the 15-pound tank and the hose kit to run your heater with. Just do that, and you're probably about as good as you're going to get. If you really need portability, buy the 1 pound canisters. You're not losing very much money by doing it. The only downside to that is you end up with a lot of empty canisters, and you have to figure out what to do with them. They're metal, so you could probably take them to metal recycling, but they may not want to take them because they're pressurized flammable gas canisters. Okay, so then it becomes hard to get rid of them. Yeah, so what do you do with them? You really shouldn't just throw them in the trash because, again, they're pressurized gas canisters. Now, is it any worse than a can of hairspray? It's also a pressurized gas canister, or butane canisters for your refilling your lighter or something like that. So that's something to think about. Is if you're using a lot of propane, you got to deal with those canisters. What are you going to do with them? So this way, I'm going to refill them because I already got all the stuff to do it. But if I was going to have a heater in one spot and not move it, I would probably use the big tank and the hose kit instead. So there you go. That's kind of the numbers, though. You don't save very much money, and it's just not worth the trouble. And in my use, I've never used a complete 1 pound canister in 24 hours running my heater. You don't need that much, so now the last note on that, I guess, I'm living in Texas. It's not 40 below here in the winter. In fact, it's March today and it's about 80 degrees. Go figure. Last week it was pretty cold. Overnight it gets down into the 30s. So first thing in the morning when I come into the bus from, I sleep in the camper. I come from the camper into the bus. The bus is pretty cold. Start up the propane heater. I run it for half an hour, take the chill off. And I also wear a toque in here and a fleece or a sweatshirt. And, I'm kind of bundled up. If I had a wife and a kid, then I'd need to burn a whole lot more propane just to keep them happy. I'm ex-military, and I can deal with being cold for a little bit. And I'm a tightwad, so I don't want to spend the money. But anyway, I guess, my last recommendation, just to put a number on it, you don't save enough money refilling your canisters to make it worth the trouble, the time involved, and the potential risk involved with filling a canister. If you do decide to do it, take the proper precautions. It's relatively safe, but it does have a lot of potential risk, and so you should just be aware of that going into it. You may do 100 of them and never have a problem. I did 17 and I had one that leaked. Cool. Thanks for watching. Okay, the setup I'm using, this is an adapter I found off of Amazon. It didn't even come in any packaging. It was literally in a Ziploc bag with a label on it, made in China. Seems to be decent construction, whatever. I don't think, in fact I can see right through the hole here, so this doesn't have a valve on it. Okay. So the idea is this end will push into here, into the end of the tank, and it'll allow the gas to flow out once it's screwed on. So I'll be thinking about that when I'm using this. to fill a tank, you hook it up to, let me see if I can, I'll kind of walk you through the process first. This is actually the first time I've done this. Propane in the tank is liquid, and then the gas is on top. So what you're trying to do is get the liquid from here into these little guys and fill this up as much liquid as you can. So what you're going to do is you're going to connect the tank to the little tank to the big tank with the adapter. Turn the tank upside down so that you're pulling the liquid off of the bottom, and then open the valve and let them equalize. Okay, I'm not going to mess with the vent at all. Once it sounds like it's equalized, then you should be able to hear it hissing, or you hear the flow. When it gets quiet, shut the valve off, turn it the other way, and with the valve off, and then just unscrew the tank is what I'm going to do first, and see how that goes. Because that, when you unscrew it, then that will close the valve that's part of the tank. And then I'll do the next one. I brought 7 of them out here. So what I've got this little non-scientific postal scale, not from work, in case anybody's curious about that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to weigh each of these, and I've got a silver Sharpie which should show up pretty nice on there, so I'll just wipe it off. And I'm going to write today's date, so it's the 18th. 2018. Alright. Make sure my scale is on 0, and I'm going to leave it on grams. Wait for it to stabilize, 369. So I'll just write 369. Alright, and we'll go through the list of them there. 370, fairly accurate there. And typically when I was using these, I ran them until the heater or whatever quit working. Okay, 370. It's interesting how close they all are. I had 2 of them are 369, 2 of them are 370, one is 371, one is 372, and then the last one was 405. I don't feel anything in there, but if I weighed it a couple times, came up to 405, so there might be a little bit left in that one. Alright. Safety glasses, just in case. So what I'm going to do, get this camera back just a little bit so you can see what's going on. About there should be good. Okay, tank is off. Connect the adapter to the tank, and again, this will blow right through, so alright, we'll do one of the 369s first. Alright, so the plan is I'm going to roll this thing over, take advantage of the edge of the table, I guess. Now the question is, can I reach that tap? Yeah, this will work. Good sound. Maybe the gas that's in the little canister would flow back, I don't know. Alright, I don't hear any sound anymore. I want to close it just to see how far we're getting. So the valve is closed. It's probably going to spit or sputter or something. So the valve is closed. I'm going to spin this off fairly quickly so I don't lose too much. Feels kind of cold though. Let's see. Liquid be, okay, let's do it this way. Gas should be on top, liquid should be on the bottom of the canister. So if I set it up, that'll keep the gas on top so I don't lose any liquid. Alright, let's just spin it off. A little bit of hissing. Okay. No trauma. Can feel liquid inside. Okay, scale is on 0. This one was 369. Okay, 516. I'm going to write that down. 516. I'm going to do it again and see if we get any improvement. One of the videos that I watched about doing this, the guy talked about chilling the tanks so that you can get more into them, which kind of makes sense. So, flip it back over again. I'm going to leave it there for a while this time just to see if it makes any difference. This time I'm just going to let it sit. I can hear a little bit. I think it may be forcing the, it would make sense if there was gas in here and liquid here, the liquid would tend to go down and the gas should rise. So if I leave it for a while, it might get better. Also, the top half of this is going to be full of gas, so I'm going to roll it so that more of the gas is close to the top, and then that should hopefully make it work better. But I'm also paying for this tank, so I'm not saving $3 because I'm paying for the propane anyway. So I'm saving less than $3, I guess is my point. I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes just to see. Little addition while I'm waiting, I just realized I had forgotten one thing to check. I grabbed a full one that I haven't used. I took off the plastic cap because, I don't know, I mean, just to make it equal. 833 is what the full one weighed. I didn't weigh very many, I just grabbed this one. I'm pretty sure I haven't used this one because it still has the cap on it. So 833 is a full one. And the label says that you're getting 16 ounces, which is 1 pound, or 453 grams. So if I figured that my empty one weighs about 370-ish, and if a total one weighs 833, you know, I can do the math, and that comes out to right around 450-ish, you know, rough numbers. So there's probably still a little bit in there, just not enough to be liquid anymore. Okay, that's about 5 minutes, so let's see how we did. Not every day, not very much. All right. So we'll turn off the tank, and then we'll tip this way so I get most of the gas on top so I don't lose liquid. Scale to balance. 513, so we actually lost a little bit from last time. So I didn't get any more in there the second time. It's an easy enough process. It only takes a couple of minutes. I didn't see any improvement after the first minute or so. if I can get it to 70% full, I almost never, I mean, I don't, like you say, for instance, on my little gas stove, I boil like a cup of water for oatmeal once a day, all right? Running the heater when I'm working, I just run it for 20 minutes to take the chill off, you know, when I get home, and then I crawl in bed and I'm asleep. Days off, if I'm sitting in the bus, I do run the heater more. What I'm thinking is, if I fill these things and can use it once a day, you know, maybe I can get 4 or 5 days out of a refilled one and keep reusing them. And then that will leave me with 5 or 6 of these that are, say, half full. Take the big tank back on payday, get a new one, and then refill the tanks again. That way I don't run out of propane, right? So I think it's worth doing. I've heard of guys getting them actually more full than a new one would be by chilling it. I'm only saving $3, and I'm actually not saving $3 because I'm buying the propane anyway. What I'm doing this for really right now is the convenience of being able to use my heater or my stove with the little tank, not have the big tank in the way because I'm in the bus. It kind of takes up a lot of room right now. So if I can get away from the big tank and just use it as a convenient way to bring propane home to fill up the little tanks, I think that's probably worth it for me. If I do this on one of my days off, it takes me half an hour to fill as many tanks as I have available. I think that's worthwhile. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of them, and I'll do one more clip to see what each one weighs after it's been filled. Okay, I've been doing a few of them, and I think I got it kind of figured out. So let me show you the steps again. That'll work. All right, tank is off. Install it with the tank up. Alright, turn the tank over. Leave it off of the edge of the table so that you can reach the handle. Open the tank. You'll hear it rush in. And I haven't seen any real improvement after the first 30 seconds or so. I'm going to rock the tank a little bit, just if there's any air bubbles, maybe they'll force themselves out. Because you're transferring liquid and the gas has got to come back out. So we're not venting, we're venting it back into the tank basically. Just a gentle rocking, I don't know if that makes any difference or not. Okay, now close the tank upside down. That'll trap any liquid in there. Okay, turn it back over. Check that I'm actually all the way closed. Then tip yourself back down a ways so that liquid will be on the bottom of the canister. Spin it off, you get a little hiss. Right there. That was it. Alright. Now, check my scale. I've been weighing each one as I went to see which will work better. That was my best one yet, 563. Alright. So, I guess at this point, yes, it does work. Without chilling, I'm not able to get a full fill. I think it's still worth the time to do it though, just so I don't have to drag the big tank around for a little appliance. So I could run my little heater or my camp stove off of the little tanks. They won't last as long, but that gets the big tank out of my way. So I could put the big tank outside, not have it sitting in the aisle of the bus, and then kind of go it that way. So I think that's still worth the time. It didn't take very long. So once I got it down, I could probably do a tank in a couple of minutes. Okay, and so my thinking is I've got a bunch of these. So I'll wait till I got 5 or 10 empty and then refill them all. Okay. It may be a factor of how well I can screw it in there as to how far that valve opens to. That sounded like a lot more flow on that one. Leaking. Let's see if I can get it to reseat. It's the first one I've had a problem that I could hear it. And it was a dirty one, so maybe it had some contamination. Now, so it's probably cleared itself. Something to keep in mind though. Probably a little bit of sand got into the valve, right? So that'll leave me with more than a dozen refill tanks anyway. The way I understand this, because propane self-pressurizes, it should have about the same pressure on a full tank as an empty tank. So even when I'm down to the last couple of pounds, I should still have the same results filling these tanks. So it doesn't really matter that this was full or not. That's my understanding. Could be wrong on that, but I think I'm right. It's getting lighter though. Alright, tip it over. That's what I forgot last time, I think. Quickly. Yes, there you go. That was a good one. I'm going to keep this tote outside just in case they vent, because they're refilled. So I'll keep that in the shade next to... Yeah, that makes sense. Put them right next to the inverter with the batteries so that if one thing blows up, they all go. Okay, they'll be a little bit further away from the batteries, but on the shaded side of the bus so they aren't exposed to sunlight. And I'll just flip the lid down and maybe I'll put a piece of plastic over it so that they don't get wet. Yeah, so I'll get, let's see, that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's not bad. 17 refills. Plus I got a few pounds left in the big tank, so I leave the big tank outside also. And then just use these for running my heater. Because that was one of the things, is I didn't want to take the heater out in the camper because I didn't feel like dragging that 15-pound tank all the time. So now I can just take the heater back and forth again. So I think that's worthwhile.